There is one habit, just one, that quietly determines the kind of person you become. It is not reading. It is not journaling. It is not exercising. It is not meditating. It is deeper. Beneath all the rituals and routines lies the silent engine of identity, the habit of conscious self-reflection. This habit is so powerful, so central, that it governs every decision you make, every value you adopt, and every belief you defend. Most people never pause to ask who they are becoming. And that's the tragedy, because if you do not choose your identity, the world will choose it for you. We begin with the question, what is identity? Identity is not just your name, your nationality, or your job title. It is the ongoing, internal narrative that defines who you believe you are. It's the lens through which you see yourself, and in turn, the world. It's the story you repeat, sometimes silently, sometimes out loud. Your identity influences what you believe is possible for you. A man who sees himself as a victim will interpret the world differently than a man who sees himself as resilient. A woman who sees herself as unworthy will behave in ways that reinforce that belief, not because she is unworthy, but because identity is self-fulfilling. Identity is destiny, not in the sense that it is fixed, but in the sense that it becomes the map by which you navigate life. And the scariest truth, most people never consciously choose their identity. They inherit it from culture, from family, from trauma, from television, and once internalized, this borrowed identity quietly dictates every thought, action, and reaction. They are puppets pulled by strings they cannot see. A habit is a repeated behavior that occurs with little to no conscious thought. It is an action that, through repetition, becomes automatic. But habits aren't just about brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. Habits exist in your thinking, in your emotional reactions, in how you view yourself. You can have habits of insecurity, habits of jealousy, habits of self-praise, and habits of avoidance. The most powerful habits aren't physical. They're philosophical. They are the ways you explain life to yourself. In the study of habits, a keystone habit is one that has a ripple effect on every area of your life. It's like pulling one thread that unravels an entire tapestry. Most people look for keystone habits in productivity, waking up early, planning your day, or exercising. And while these are noble pursuits, they miss the deeper truth. The keystone habit that shapes every other habit is self-reflection. It is the habit of pausing daily to ask, who am I becoming? What did I do today that aligned or misaligned with who I want to be? What do I need to change? This habit recalibrates your identity. Without it, life happens to you. With it, you happen to life. Your self-image, how you see yourself, is shaped by what you repeatedly tell yourself and do. Every action is a vote for the person you believe yourself to be. If you lie often, you begin to see yourself as a liar. If you show up with courage daily, you begin to believe you are brave. It is not the action alone that matters. It is what the action reinforces in your mind. This is why reflection is vital. Without it, you live blindly. You repeat actions without examining the self-image they are shaping. And slowly, silently, you become someone you never intended to be. Let's take an example. A young man starts going to the gym. At first, it's hard, but he sticks with it. 3 months and something shifts. He no longer says, I'm trying to get fit. He starts saying, I'm a disciplined person. That's identity formation. Now flip the coin. A person procrastinates. Then again. Eventually, they stop saying, I'm just tired. They start saying, I've always been lazy. That too is identity formation. The difference between transformation and stagnation lies in whether or not the individual notices these shifts. That's where reflection comes in. That's where philosophy becomes personal. At the heart of every habit lies a simple neurological loop. Cue, routine, reward. This is how all behavior, good or bad, becomes automatic. It's not just about smoking or eating junk food. It's about the way you think, speak, react, and choose. Let's break it down. 1. Cue a trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode. 2. Routine, the behavior that follows the cue. 3. Reward, the benefit or feeling you get from the routine. Over time, your brain begins to crave the reward and skips conscious thought. You no longer choose the behavior. It becomes who you are. But what happens when the behavior isn't external, but internal? A cue might be insecurity. The routine becomes negative self-talk. The reward? A strange sense of familiarity. It may not be joy, but it feels safe, known, predictable, so you keep doing it. And without reflection, you don't even realize it's a loop. You just call it me. The brain is plastic, not in texture, but in function. Neuroplasticity means that your thoughts and behaviors physically rewire your brain. Every time you repeat a behavior, you deepen the groove of that neural pathway. Like water carving a canyon, repetition shapes your brain. This is powerful because it means you are not fixed, you are moldable. Your identity is not trapped in stone, it is being written right now through every habit. When you reflect on your choices, you interrupt the unconscious. You step off autopilot. You become aware of the grooves being formed. You ask, is this the canyon I want to be carved into? That 1 second of reflection, that's where freedom lives. There is an artist sculpting your identity every day, and it's not you. It's your environment, the people around you, the content you consume, the values you're surrounded by, your phone, your room, your job, your friends, your digital feed. All of it whispers who you are and who you should be. And if you do not reflect on these inputs, you absorb them as truth. If your friends normalize laziness, you adopt it. If your feed glamorizes status, you chase it. If your culture rewards surface over substance, you perform. Without reflection, you become a puppet of your environment. You think you're choosing. You're not. You're adapting. Only through daily reflection do you reclaim authorship over your own script. Now we arrive at the core of this philosophy. The habit of conscious self-reflection is the one habit that shapes your entire identity. Why? Because all change, all growth, all transformation begins in awareness. You cannot change what you do not see. You cannot heal what you do not name. You cannot become what you do not believe is possible. Reflection brings all three to the table. You see your behavior. You name your patterns. You ask what's possible beyond them. It is not just a journal. It is a confrontation with your soul. You can have all the motivation in the world, but if you don't stop to ask who you're becoming, that motivation becomes a treadmill, fast-moving, going nowhere. Self-reflection is not about overthinking or navel-gazing. It's about checking the compass. Every day, am I living by my values? Did I act in integrity today? What emotion guided my actions? It's a conversation with your higher self, not to shame, but to guide. Think of the mind like a garden. Without reflection, weeds grow. With reflection, you pull them out. You plant with intention. You water with care. And in time, you walk through your own mind and find beauty there. This idea is not new. It is ancient. Socrates famously declared, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Descartes began his philosophy with radical doubt, questioning even his own existence. The Buddha taught self-inquiry as the path to liberation from suffering. Across history, from east to west, every great philosophical tradition begins not with answers, but with questions. And those questions are aimed inward. Reflection is the bridge between experience and wisdom. Without it, life remains raw and unshaped. With it, every moment becomes a teacher. Beliefs are not fixed. They are built through repetition, emotion, and memory. What you reflect on becomes your reality. If you daily reflect on pain, your world becomes colored by suffering. If you reflect on growth, struggle becomes fertilizer. Reflection doesn't just observe belief, it shapes it. Reflect on failure, and you'll redefine success. Reflect on anger, and you'll uncover fear. Reflect on fear, and you'll find the wound. This is how beliefs evolve, not by force, but by gentle inquiry. Over time, your core beliefs shift from reactive to chosen. And with that shift, your identity begins to align with truth. It's important to distinguish reflection from rumination. Reflection is curious, constructive, and forward-moving. Rumination is obsessive, self-critical, and paralyzing. Reflection asks, "What can I learn?" Rumination whispers, "Why am I like this?" The difference is subtle, but vital. True reflection is rooted in love, in the belief that you are worth knowing, worth guiding, worth becoming. So, when you reflect, don't turn the mirror into a weapon. Use it as a lantern. When you reflect daily, you stop being the tenant of your mind and become its architect. You decide which thoughts get to live there, which beliefs get to stay, which fears must go, and slowly, you build a mind that feels like home. Most people live in mental houses built by others, parents, teachers, influencers, society. Reflection hands you the blueprint. It lets you redesign, not overnight, but every day, one insight at a time. This is how identity is shaped, not by force, but by daily intention. Most people think identity is a solo journey, that who you are is determined in solitude. And while solitude is critical, your identity is also shaped and revealed in relationship. Every interaction you have is a mirror. It shows you how you handle conflict, what you value in connection, what you're willing to tolerate, where you overgive or undergive, who you think you need to be loved. Without reflection, you misread these mirrors. You repeat the same relationship patterns and call them your type. You project past wounds onto new people and wonder why things fall apart. You mistake chemistry for compatibility and attraction for alignment. Reflection gives you the power to slow down the story, to ask, why did I react that way? What was I afraid of losing in that moment? Was that really about them or about me? This inner questioning prevents the unconscious repetition of old cycles. It allows you to grow, not just alone, but with others. People talk about hustle culture like it's the engine of success, but busyness doesn't equal growth. Many are sprinting in circles, achieving outwardly while collapsing inwardly. Without reflection, growth becomes shallow. You might gain skills, but not wisdom. You might reach goals, but not become someone who feels like success. Reflection makes your growth meaningful. It connects external progress to internal evolution. Did that success align with my purpose? Did I compromise myself for achievement? What does fulfillment really mean to me? When you ask those questions, you stop climbing every ladder. You start choosing the ones that lead to your soul. And in doing so, you don't just grow, you evolve. At some point, the identity journey goes beyond psychology. It enters the realm of the spiritual, not in a religious sense, but in the pursuit of depth, meaning, transcendence. Spiritual maturity isn't about rituals or doctrine. It's about your relationship to your essence, the part of you untouched by ego, fear, or status. Daily self-inquiry peels back the layers of false identity. Who am I beneath my roles? What remains when I lose what I cling to? What is observing all my thoughts? These questions don't give immediate answers. That's the point. They point you beyond the surface, into the silence, into the mystery, into the source of true identity. Reflection becomes a form of prayer, not to a God, but to your own becoming. Your identity is constantly in conversation with your integrity, the alignment between what you say, what you believe, and what you do. When your identity and integrity are misaligned, you feel it. Anxiety without a name, a heaviness in the chest, a sense of fraudulence, exhaustion from performance. These symptoms don't mean you're broken. They mean you're out of sync with your truth. Daily reflection is how you recalibrate. You check for drift. You return to center. Did I speak truth today? Did I abandon myself to please someone? Did I act in a way that honors who I say I am? These small questions are sacred. They protect your integrity, and over time, your identity becomes not just a story you tell, but a life you embody. History, the greatest minds have had one thing in common, a rigorous habit of self-examination. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote Meditations as a daily reflection journal, never meant to be published, only to sharpen his soul. Leo Tolstoy, one of the greatest novelists, kept moral diaries, constantly asking how to become a better man. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the Holocaust and creator of logotherapy, used reflection to find meaning even in the depths of human suffering. These weren't passive thinkers. They were active sculptors of the self. They understood, without reflection, power becomes ego. Success becomes emptiness. Genius becomes madness. With reflection, life becomes a philosophy, one that others can live by long after you're gone. You don't need a mountain retreat or a guru to start this habit. You need one thing: intentional time. Here's how to begin. 1. Pick a consistent time. Morning or night is ideal. 2. Keep it short. Even 5 minutes is powerful. 3. Ask simple but deep questions like, what did I learn today? What emotion ran my life today? What did I do that I'm proud or not proud of? What identity did I reinforce today? 4. Write it down. Your thoughts become more real when you see them on paper. 5. Stay honest. Don't write what sounds good. Write what's true. Reflection isn't performance. It's intimacy with your inner world. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. You'll catch your own lies. You'll speak to yourself more clearly, more kindly, more courageously, and you'll watch your identity slowly sharpen, like a blade drawn across stone. Writing is not just expression, it is excavation. When you write reflectively, you don't just record your life, you decode it. You see what stories you're still telling, what wounds are still driving your behavior, what truths are ready to be claimed. Journaling turns fog into clarity. It turns chaos into insight. It turns random emotion into structured awareness. But the real magic is what happens over time. When you look back at journals from months or years ago, you see your evolution. Your voice changes. Your insights deepen. Your identity matures. That's the fruit of reflection, a written record of your becoming. Even if you never write a word, you still reflect in the way you talk to yourself. Your inner dialogue is the most consistent voice in your life. It is either a friend, a mentor, a critic, or a tyrant. Reflection transforms this voice from reactive to intentional. By noticing your self-talk, you begin to guide it. You ask, is this belief true? Is this fear grounded? Would I speak to someone I love this way? And slowly your inner world becomes safer, kinder, stronger. The voice that once tore you down becomes the voice that lifts you up. That is identity work. That is reflection. Let's be brutally honest. Most people don't reflect, not because they're lazy, but because they're afraid. To reflect is to face yourself. And in a world that glorifies distraction, constant activity becomes a shield. If you keep moving, you never have to look inward. But the cost, you build a life based on others' values. You wake up in careers, relationships, and identities that don't feel like yours. You chase happiness, but never find it, because you never stop to ask what it truly means to you. A life without reflection is a life on autopilot, and autopilot doesn't lead to greatness, it leads to regret. One of the most overlooked truths in personal growth is this: your values aren't really yours until you've questioned them. You may say you value honesty, loyalty, freedom, or love, but until you sit down and ask yourself why and how these values show up in your life, they're just borrowed concepts. Most people inherit values from their parents, their culture, their religion, their peer group, but inherited values are not chosen values. They only become part of your identity when you've wrestled with them, challenged them, tested them in your own life. Reflection is how you take something society gave you and decide whether to keep it. Ask yourself, who taught me this value? Is it serving me or limiting me? Have I ever truly embodied this value, or do I just repeat it? When you reflect on your values, you're not disrespecting tradition. You're engaging with it, deepening it, making it real. And only then can you build a life that doesn't just look good, but feels true. Every decision you make is a vote, not just for an outcome, but for a version of yourself. Say you wake up and decide to scroll for 30 minutes instead of journaling. That's not just time lost. That's a subtle message you send to yourself. I am someone who reacts instead of reflects. Now, one choice won't define you, but many choices, repeated, do. Your identity isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a direction you walk in, one decision at a time. This is why reflection is so critical. It creates a pause between stimulus and response. It lets you choose the direction instead of defaulting to your programming. Ask yourself after key decisions. What self did I act from? Who did I reinforce with that choice? Who did I silence in the process? Over time, you'll see that every moment, no matter how small, is a fork in the road of your identity. In a hyper-connected world, solitude is one of the most radical acts of self-ownership. We fear being alone because it forces us to hear ourselves. But that's exactly why we need it. Time alone, paired with reflection, is not loneliness. It's intimacy with yourself. It's where your real voice speaks, not the voice shaped by likes, comments, or conversations. In solitude, you realize what actually matters to you, what you've been ignoring, what emotions you haven't processed, what dreams you've buried to fit in. Without solitude, you live a noisy life, loud but hollow, full but disconnected. Reflection requires space. Space requires courage. But the identity you'll meet there is the one that's truly yours. Pain is a mirror. It shows you who you are and who you could become. But pain only transforms you if you reflect on it. Otherwise, it just leaves a scar. You either process it or you repeat it. Ask anyone who's suffered a heartbreak, lost a job, or faced failure. What mattered most wasn't the event. It was how they made meaning from it. And meaning is not automatic. It is constructed day by day through reflection. When you reflect on your pain, you start to ask, what did this experience show me about myself? What needs healing, not hiding? Who am I now that I've survived this? Without this reflection, pain hardens you. With it, pain opens you, softens you, deepens you. This is how suffering becomes strength, not by forgetting, but by integrating. We live in a world that teaches logic but neglects emotion. Yet emotion is the compass of identity. You can't know who you are if you don't know what you feel. Reflection is how you translate emotion into insight. You feel angry, but reflection asks why. You feel anxious, but reflection uncovers the root. You feel numb, and reflection gently explores the shutdown. This isn't just psychology. It's emotional self-respect. It's saying, my feelings matter enough to explore. Over time, this creates inner clarity, emotional congruence. Your outer life begins to match your inner truth. And that alignment, that's identity at peace with itself. There's a myth in modern culture, the myth of the authentic self, as if it's a fixed thing you discover once and for all. But here's the truth. You are not a statue. You are a stream. You are always changing, evolving, becoming. Reflection doesn't just help you find yourself. It helps you track yourself as you evolve. What was true for you at 20 may no longer serve you at 30. What defined you during a crisis may not fit you in your healing. That's not failure. That's growth. Without reflection, you stay stuck in outdated identities. You keep performing old roles, living from old wounds, wearing a mask that no longer fits. But with reflection, you shed skins. You allow yourself to become new. The ego is the false self, the mask built on fear, performance, and approval. And while the ego serves a role, unchecked it becomes a prison. Reflection is the ego's undoing, because when you reflect honestly, you begin to see where you're trying to impress instead of express, where you're hiding pain behind perfection, where your identity is armor, not truth. This is painful. The ego will resist. It will say, you are your status, your looks, your followers, your wins. But reflection offers another voice. You are what remains when all of that falls away. And in that silence, a truer self emerges, not built, but revealed. That is the beginning of freedom. Every time you reflect, you let something die. a belief, a pattern, a version of yourself. And every time something dies, something new is born. A deeper truth, a clearer path, a more whole identity. This is the sacred cycle of transformation. You don't become someone new by adding more. You become someone new by letting go of what you're not. Reflection is the practice of this death and rebirth. You end the day not with numb scrolling, but with sacred closure. What part of me did I outgrow today? What did I learn about who I no longer need to be? What seed of the future self did I plant? This is how daily reflection turns time into transformation. The world doesn't really change when you reflect. You do. But when you change, you begin to see the world differently. What used to trigger you now teaches you. What used to feel like chaos now reveals a pattern. What used to control you now becomes a choice. Reflection changes your lens. And when your lens changes, so does your life. You don't need to escape the world to find peace. You need to reflect enough to stop projecting your inner chaos onto it. As within, so without. One of the most powerful things reflection builds, quietly and slowly, is self-belief, not the kind rooted in external validation or surface-level confidence, but the kind that comes from knowing you are congruent with your truth. You have integrity in your actions. You are aware of your flaws, but not defined by them. Self-belief doesn't come from hype, it comes from evidence. And reflection is how you gather that evidence. Every day that you pause, assess, ask, and adjust, you reinforce a deep message to yourself. I am someone worth understanding. This is the quiet foundation of identity, because when you trust yourself, truly trust yourself, no one can take that from you. Identity crises don't happen overnight. They build quietly in the background when reflection is absent. You keep moving, doing, achieving, but you stop checking in. You rise in a career you no longer care about. You stay in a relationship that's draining you. You become someone everyone respects, but you no longer recognize. And then one day it hits you. Who am I really? That question doesn't come from nowhere. It's the echo of years of ignored signals. Daily reflection prevents this crash. It's like regular maintenance on a car. Small check-ins that prevent breakdowns. You notice the misalignment, Siri. You course correct. You grow with awareness, not by accident. And most of all, you avoid the slow death of living as someone you're not. Every future version of you is being shaped right now, not by the big decisions, but by the small, repeated ones. And the only way to steer those choices wisely is reflection. Imagine two people. One reflects daily, one never does. After a year, they may live in the same city, have the same job, wear the same clothes, but internally, they're living in different realities. One knows who they are, the other is guessing. One chooses based on values, the other based on pressure. One is becoming someone, the other is becoming anyone. This is the silent divergence that determines the course of a life. And the difference is one habit, reflection. Philosophers for centuries have explored the question, what does it mean to become? The Greeks called it telos, your highest potential. Nietzsche called it becoming who you are. Existentialists said meaning isn't given, it's made. But none of these philosophies can be lived without reflection, because becoming isn't passive. It's not automatic. It's not a gift. Becoming is the result of inner confrontation, and reflection is the battlefield where that confrontation happens. Every time you reflect, you ask, am I on my path or someone else's? Am I living from my soul or from fear? Am I becoming more me or less? And in that moment, you make your philosophy real. In a world flooded with opinions, options, and opportunities, discernment is power. Discernment is the ability to choose what matters and what doesn't, to say no to good things because they're not the right things, to see through noise and find your signal. But discernment doesn't come from intellect. It comes from reflection. You know your truth because you've sat with it. You know your limits because you've tested them. You know your path because you've walked it, rewalked it, and questioned every step. Without reflection, you become reactive. With it, you become wise. Discernment isn't magic. It's the product of quiet, consistent inquiry. True confidence is not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need applause, because it is grounded in self-awareness. Confidence without reflection is arrogance, built on assumption, not understanding. But confidence born from reflection is humble, unshakable, and powerful. It says, I've faced my flaws. I've explored my wounds. I know who I am and who I'm not. That kind of confidence doesn't crumble under criticism. It listens, learns, but it doesn't lose itself. And that's the identity people trust, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Everyone has an inner compass, but not everyone knows how to read it. That compass is made of intuition, values, and vision, and it points you toward alignment. But like any tool, if it's never used, it rusts. If it's ignored, it weakens. Reflection is how you calibrate your inner compass. Was that decision true to me? Did I abandon my gut because I wanted approval? Am I living in harmony with what I claim to believe? The more you reflect, the more precise your compass becomes, and eventually, you stop asking others for directions because you trust your own. Here's the paradox. If you don't reflect on yourself, the world will do it for you. It will assign you a role. You're the provider. You're the funny one. You're the overachiever. You're the rebel. You're the fixer. And because you're not reflecting, you accept it. You let others define your identity, and you live inside someone else's story. But when you reflect, you reclaim authorship. You start to say, no, that's not me anymore. That role served me once. Now it suffocates me. That identity was armor, not truth. And in that moment, you step into your own life, fully, authentically, unapologetically. Never underestimate the power of a single question. Asked with honesty, it can shift your life, change your direction, save your soul. Why do I keep ending up in relationships like this? Why does this achievement feel so empty? What if I'm not afraid of failure, but of success? Who am I performing for right now? These questions seem small, but they unlock entire dimensions of self-awareness. The habit of reflection isn't just about journaling or meditating. It's about letting the right questions enter your life and having the courage to sit with them. We live in a world that moves fast, shouts loudly, and rarely looks inward. But the people who change the world, who inspire, create, lead, are those who reflect. Because reflection gives you depth in a shallow age, clarity in a chaotic world, integrity in a time of illusion, and identity in an era of imitation. You don't need more information. You need more integration. And that comes from one habit, practiced daily, quietly, fiercely: reflection.